Hello again, everybody. I thought while I was waiting for some spares and bits and pieces to arrive on a project I've got on the go, and I'm actually sort of twiddling my thumbs, would you believe, that I'd sort of make this little video that sort of is a bit of a carry-on from a continuation from one I made recently, although on a slightly different variation of the subject, restored bikes. This actually goes back quite a few years, and it's not just about restorations actually, but it's about some of the motives and thinking behind some of them. And quite a few years ago, I did work on bikes for, three different dealers in classic motorbikes, and all decent people. They weren't cowboys or villains or anything like that, but they had one thing in common, of course. They were all trying to make a living and make a profit, which is what it's all about at the end of the day, especially in the sort of buying and selling game, which is a whole area that I just don't want to get involved in. I thought about it years ago. I even dabbled in it about probably 40 years ago, when I used to work in the forestry, and as a sort of bit of evening work when I was younger, occasionally I'd buy and sell sort of rather tired, battered, well-used bikes and knock them into shape as best as I could and sell them to the local youngsters just to knock about on, for bikes that were real bargain basement stuff. But anyway, I decided a long time ago I certainly wasn't going to get involved in trying to restore classic bikes and sell them and make a profit, because one of the reasons is, and especially based on my experiences working for these dealers I'll talk about in a moment, although I won't name, was that if you sell a bike, just say you sell something for £5,000, okay, thank you very much, you've got the money, ta-da, enjoy your bike and whatever, you've got that money there. Now, ideally, you want to use that money perhaps to pay some bills, buy some food, pay for your next project, materials, whatever, reinvest it one way or another. How long can you give it, and how do you know that the person who's just bought this bike isn't going to come back banging on the door a couple of weeks later? I'm not happy with this, you said this and it's done that and it's broken down. And you just don't know quite what you're going to get. Even if you've done the best job you can to your best of your knowledge and your ability, you just don't know what's around the corner with them, really. And I've seen quite a few examples here that have been shocking. And that brings me to dealer number one then, who I used to take on a little bit of his surplus work because he had quite a large catchment area, and I did quite a few fairly sort of high-end classic British bikes for him. Well, for them. They were a partnership, actually. And I got some quite interesting machines to work on, and I remember one of them was actually a Triumph Hurricane, and it had been re-imported from the States. It was, I don't know, 95% complete probably, in reasonable shape cosmetically and everything. And my brief was just get it going and get it sorted so that it could pass an MOT. So, okay. It came here and I started working on it and working through it, and my mate Dave, who sadly had the fire, he actually helped me out a bit with it, actually. And more on him another time. He's getting there. Things are coming together slowly. Anyway, back to this Triumph Hurricane. When we got it to the point where it was ready to start it up, and bear in mind, obviously, we'd changed all the oils and everything like that. We had been through it and got everything in pretty good shape, or so we thought. Got the engine started, and of course, initially, cold, it started up. The oil light went out, great, it sounded okay, it was running okay, trip up and down the lane, alright, and we sort of twiddled about with the carburetors a bit, checked the timing, stuff like that, got it running fairly nicely, and took it for a longer ride, and then, would you believe, the oil light came on. So, I had it out there. In fact, there is a very short video of it. I've got it on YouTube, actually. Anyone interested, look up Triumph Hurricane. I think it's the only video I've got, and it's when I had my first camera that wouldn't do more than 45 seconds, and you'll see it. And you'll see us trying to knock the oil light out on it, and I think we got the oil light to go out at about 3.5 or 4,000 RPM. So anyway, I got in touch with these guys, the dealers, who were doing this bike for an owner, and I said, right, it's going. I said, it's moving under its own power. It probably would pass an MOT, but we got this issue. The oil light's coming on, so the oil pressure is crap. What would you like to do about it? What would it involve? I said, well, a full engine strip. Oh, no, we can't be doing that. To be honest, he said, the guy who owns this is probably only going to sit and look at it and polish it. It'll be all right. Send it back. We'll pay you for what you've done. Anyway, off it went back to them. And, of course, I didn't have any direct contact with the owner at that stage until a BSA Rocket 3, which he also owned, came here in very sort of scorched, burnt, rusty pieces. It had been salvaged from a fire, and it was in a terrible state, and I had that one to do up. And again, I was working for this dealer, and same old briefing, you know, try and keep the cost down, blah blah blah, all that sort of thing. Well, I got the frame painted, I rebuilt the engine, but I always remember asking, I measured the valve springs. Now the valve springs looked a bit rusty, but I measured them and they all came within spec. So I said to this guy, I said, look, you know, I've measured the valve springs. They seem all right dimensionally, but they do look a bit rusty. What would you like me to do? I'd rather change them. And he said, well, if they're in spec, he said, we've got to save every penny we can with this, put them back in. So I put them back in. Right, so as I'm getting along with this project now, I'd built wheels, I'd had bits and pieces painted. The owner had already had the tank and side panels painted, and they'd been sent to me. Eventually, the thing is sort of nearing completion, and these dealers closed down. Not because of any funny business, they just ceased trading. I think one guy went off to do something else, and another guy moved away, and whatever. And I said, when they told me they were closing down, I said, well, I think you better put me in touch with the guy who owns the Rocket 3. So they did. Rocket 3 got finished, and he had it back. The next thing is, it came back here because it was running roughly and misfiring. Long story short was, a valve spring had broken. So, alright, I changed the valve spring. That got it going on 3. Everything seemed fine with it eventually, and I've heard no more of it since, so I think it was alright. But the Hurricane, interestingly enough, the Hurricane came back to me the first time the owner, the actual owner, sent it here. So it was the second time I had the Hurricane here. And he said, oh, I got this Triumph Hurricane, and I'm not happy with the carburation on it. He said, just put new carbs on it, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, right, okay, let's see what we can do with it. And it turned out that I said to Dave, who helped me out again, have an hour on the carburetors, just running the engine and making adjustments. I don't think it even took him an hour, 40 minutes perhaps. He adjusted mixture screws, throttle slides and so on. We had it running beautifully on the original carburetors. I got in touch with the owner to tell him that the carburetors were fine, it was running fine, but I noticed underneath the bike there was this wire hanging down, and I had a look at it, and it was the wire that should have gone to the oil pressure light switch. It had been cut. So, oh right, okay, I'll clean this up and bare the end and put a new end on it and put it back onto the oil pressure switch. Whereupon, when I started the engine, of course the oil light was on, and it wouldn't go out until he revved it to about 3,500 RPM. So I got in touch with the owner and told him that we'd sorted his carburation out and it was running nicely, but the oil light was coming on. Impossible, he said. I know it used to, he said, but I paid a guy to sort that out. He said it cost me about £2,500, but he's been through the engine and he sorted it. I said, well, what he's done, I said, is he's cleaned the engine up very carefully, probably with wire wool and stuff, and compressed air over a couple of days, and he's cut your wire to your oil pressure switch. Your engine is buggered. Well, he said a few choice words. I said, well, don't shoot the messenger. What do you want to do about it? Anyway, long story short was we rebuilt the engine in it. I think we had a crank regrind, new big end and main bearing shells, anything and everything it needed, we did, and it finally went away in working order. But what I'm coming to, there's two triples, a BSA and a Triumph, or BSA by any other name, Triumph. Both of them really needed more spending on them, time-wise and money-wise, than they got. And it was all about saving a few quid and profit margins and so on. And I've also had another dealer send me bikes after he sold them, and he's told me on the phone, oh, do you think you could have a look at this one, Paul? I sold it a couple of weeks ago. The guy's not happy, he's complaining about this. I don't really want to have to give his money back, and I don't want it to cost too much because I haven't got much of a margin on this. Can you see what you can do with it? You know, so all this stuff put me off buying, restoring, selling, because I know that we've seen some restored bikes, haven't we, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, we have. And I think I know what's been done to sort of expand the profit margin a little bit, it would seem, on quite a few of them. But anyway, I like to do them properly, so there's no point in even trying, because I'd be working at a loss on every bike I churned out. But this other dealer, like I say, I fixed a couple of bikes up for him as cheap as possible, so he could give them back to the owners and say, there, the thing you've been complaining about is sorted now. I don't know whether what he paid me caused him to make a loss, but at least he didn't have to give a full refund. But at the same time, he'd taken money for that bike and ended up possibly having to be prepared to give it back. So you just don't know where you are with it, and I don't like that either. Finally, there was a dealer number 3, and this is quite a long time ago, and this was a Royal Enfield 500 Twin. Looked stunning, but it was smoking and dribbling black oil out of the exhausts. Could I have a look at the top end and the valve guides and the piston rings and so on, blah blah blah. I stripped the top end for him, and I found there was play in the big ends. I said, what do you want to do about this? I said, the big ends need sorting out. This is a full engine strip. What do you want to do with it? Oh, I can't really be spending that much money on it, he said. How about, he said, I'll pay you for your time and what you do. Will you just put it all back together? He said, I think I'll put it in an auction. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And I have done this once or twice, but I've stressed, and I stressed with this guy, don't you put my name on it. It hasn't been here. All I'm doing is I'm putting it back to how it was, and we're going back to a time before you brought it to me. I don't get mentioned. But I just wanted to sort of point out from my own experiences that these things do get out there, and the Rocket 3 looked stunning, and believe me, the crank, everything, the important stuff inside it was top notch. But to save a few quid here and there, I was asked not to fit new valve springs. If it had been my own bike, I would have just thrown the valve springs away. I wouldn't have even measured them. But they measured up. Well, put them back in then, Paul. And this is the sort of thing that happens, and they're just examples of a few things that I know that I've actually been involved in myself, and my hands are being tied to some degree or another. But that is why I will not restore bikes to try and make a living and buy and sell. I have restored bikes for customers, but to be honest, that's a bit of a pain too. I'd rather just repair, fix, tune, maintain, that kind of thing, and not get too involved in expensive cosmetic stuff, and this transfer should be there at such and such an angle, and are they the right handlebars? I don't need all that, but hands-on spanner stuff, get the job done, get the thing running right, hopefully make the customer happy. That's where my happy place is. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it.